Okay, so there was a thread like a month ago about using the Yubikeys with U2F to do two-factor security on the systems themselves when using Linux. And I said I could write some documentation, but it's been a crazy few weeks for me. And it's basically, I figured we can have a quick conversation. We can talk about how to use the Yubikey, U2F server, U2F client libraries, and how to actually integrate these with PAM so that you can do sudo, so that you can ensure that anytime your password is required, you actually have to have the Yubikey physically present. Now, Balu, right before the call, she said, hey, I got it working with sudo. It sounds like you got parts of this working. Can you tell me where you're at this point?
Well, after entering sudo password, it waits for me to tap on the Yubikey. That's the current state, which I think is what I wanted.
Okay, that's essentially what you want. Now you're running Debian.
Yes.
Okay. And for the record of everybody else, I'm running Arch. And no, I didn't say it first. Dude gets the joke. Yep. So I've actually been using libu2f, the server and the clients, with my Yubikey for since I got it sometime 2 years ago. But at that time, they weren't distributed as binaries as part of most distributions. So being a packager, it was easy for me to do once I figured it out. However, it's now become a lot more easy to do because Yubikey has officially gotten some of these things upstream. So like Ubuntu actually has them in the repository now. However, how to configure PAM is not clear at all. So the quick summary is that you need to make use of 3 primary components. I'm going to hit share screen real quick. Share. Settings, profile to hard. There we go. That just makes it flash a little less because it's not transparent. QS lib2 U2F. There's 3 basic components that you have to care about, and that is libu2f. There we go. libu2f host, libu2f server, and libu2f, or PAM U2F. These 3 pieces come together to actually make the functioning U2F for integration with PAM. The server side is the piece of the library that actually handles root access code behaviors. The host side is actually for doing the requests and behaviors there. And then the PAM U2F is actually that integration that bridges that so that you can use it so that when you even try to log into your computer, sudo, not sudo, that every time PAM actually requests it, you actually are now required to have your Yubikey present. So once you have these things installed, it's a matter of actually activating your keys. And now you see it's pausing, but I need to hit my little button here. There we go. Now it is, there we go, U2F mappings. So there's a file in etc U2F mappings that actually contains like your username and then the output of a couple of commands that actually give you the ID that says this is the signature of the Yubikey that when they tap, I'm going to accept. In my case, I actually have 3 separate Yubikeys. Most people are a lot more straightforward because they have 1. So their string will be about this long instead of 1 here and another one after it and then another one after that. So the first thing is that you have to set up this mapping file. You can map it in two places. There's one method that you do this and you install it into your home directory, which is totally viable if you're not doing it the way I am. I'm doing them at the system level because my home is actually encrypted separately from the system, and it requires me to log in for it to decrypt. So if this was in my home directory, I would never be able to decrypt my home directory. So mine is set up specifically under etc. U2F mappings. It can actually be in home.u2f. I have to pull up the documentation from Yubikey.
PAM config something.
Yeah,
Dot config / something.
yeah, it's buried somewhere in there, and we'll find the documentation. Let's see, PAM U2F CFG. PAM U2F CFG is actually the utility that is used for generating this content. I want to point out two key items for people that are familiar with U2F but not familiar when using it with PAM, is that the app ID and origin strings are defaultively set to whatever your host name is. So just so you know, if you have PAM configured and you change your host name, you might have a bad day. They're easy to regenerate. This is the good news. As long as you have your key and you can run PAM U2F, you can regenerate these. If you have to have root to update the U2F mappings in etc., like I do, you want to make sure you update these before you change your host name. But you do not have to supply TAC-O or TAC-I, which are origin and app ID, when you run this command. What's useful is I can run PAM U2F config TAC-U, which, by the way, defaults to the current username. So I sub1, and I can literally just do nothing else but this. And it will output the string that you see above, and then you can place that into which of your two files that you want. If you're just doing it to your home directory, you can just pipe it right into wherever your file is actually at. Control-C on that one because I don't want to do that. So for example, I have it set to say someone, then my Yubikey is over here flashing, I'm going to tap it, and I get a string that says, username someone, and this is the key identification that says that Yubikey actually works, right? So like I said, we'll find the documentation on where this individual file lies. But I'm going to go over and show you how PAM actually gets configured. So I actually have mine set in part of the system auth. Wow, keyboard offset, vim system auth. And I have this line right here. So I have mine set counter to the existing documentation. I have mine set to a hard require, which means as long as I have this line in my PAM configuration, you absolutely have to have a Yubikey, and it has to match to an entry in the U2F mappings to do anything with my user account, which includes doing sudo. Now, the interesting part here is the PAM U2F is the module that you're going to require. You want this to be high up in your lists, and you want it specifically to be into the auth, right? Now, this parameter can change. This depends on how you've configured things. By default, this will go into the home directory that Balu mentioned. In my case, since I'm using the system one, I'm specifically stating I want the one that's in etc. U2F mappings. So if you want to move this to another location, this is where you change that value. No? Okay, there's got to be some manual entry for that. Confirm the package name. It's PAM underscore U2F. No wonder I had it wrong. Okay, so manual page basically states what you want to end up doing. So PAM U2F, and then the parameter options come after it. In my case, I'm not using app ID or origin ID. As you can see, again, it says that it defaults to being the host name for both of these. So if you ever want to play with these facts, be aware that they exist and they're here. Most people won't need to touch them. I make use of auth file, and I specifically set where it is. And hey, look, we found that path to where the default variable is at, Balu. It's under .config Yubikeys U2F keys. So it's the same content as I would put in my U2F mappings file. It's buried under your home directory, which this is viable if you're using, say, FDE with looks, FDE being full disk encryption. We require that you have your disk encrypted. In my case, part of my root is not encrypted, but my home directory is. And now that I have further capabilities that we've learned of in the last couple of weeks, I will be switching on full disk encryption on top of encrypting my home directory, which, yes, that means I'm encrypting twice, I know. But the nice part is I never have to worry about anybody getting to any of my stuff, ever. Okay, there are a whole bunch of other items that can be used. I've never bothered to configure these in particular because their default values have always managed to work for me. I have never bothered with setting max devices, but here's an example where like the maximum number of devices allowed per user is 24. If you have 24 separate Yubikeys or U2F devices, guys, that's a lot. Maybe you've got plenty of room, but you don't need that many. Interactive. This one is actually really nice. So you can actually set interactive and then set the prompt message. Okay. Set the prompt a message and wait before testing the presence of the U2F device. So this is really handy for those U2F devices that don't physically have a button to touch like a Yubikey. I know they exist, but I can't tell you what their names are off the top of my head. And then there's a prompt that you can actually use, and it actually sets the specific message that is sent when you're being asked to specifically do the Yubikeys touch action. I love that they are very specific, like be careful about getting the spaces around this because you could easily screw up a parameter. PAM is very touchy about its formatting on strings. You don't want to screw that one up. And here's a queue message. This is actually what it says, like, hey, I need you to touch your Yubikey or whatever. It doesn't always do that, but you can add it so that it does. There's also this one here where you say no detect, and it will actually just be like, I didn't bother to check if one's there, you didn't answer me, so bye-bye, which I don't have turned on specifically, but I can tell you that if I don't have my Yubikey present, it will do a detection, see that there's no key, and just outright deny the PAM off like that. Yeah, for example, yeah, be careful with this. So when in doubt, read the manual. And the manual is the same when it comes across these. So they've actually got a link to their GitHub project with Yubikeys and the documentation for the homepage for PAM U2F, which links off to the libu2f host and server. Now, for example, let's see. What?
SSD.
Yeah, I was like, right, wait a minute. Yeah. So, SSH, GBX. Obviously, it doesn't know about its own SSH key, but what I'm trying to point out is I'm now SSH'd into my box, right? Even over SSH, I physically have to touch the Yubikey attached to the device. Now, most people say, well, maybe we should authenticate SSH through the Yubikey so it can do it remotely, which is doable. In my case, this is my laptop, right? This isn't a remote server. I want this thing to require my Yubikey for off at all times. If my laptop were to be remotely exploited somehow, if I had SSH turned on, I still have to push the button every time. So even like I'm at home right now, and if I'm on my desktop and I want to SSH to my laptop, I have to actually do sudo su and then reach over and touch the Yubikey on my dock, as an example. Which means if I'm in a, God forbid, a cafe and somebody managed to get into my SSH somehow, they can't get into root because I've locked that down left and right. But they then have to walk over to my laptop and press the button. And if it starts blinking on me and I don't have a queue for it, I'm gonna guess something's up. So let's see here. I'm gonna hit stop share for a second. Any questions, Balu?
So this works with you added it to system auth, right? So it automatically hooks to your KDE login manager. You use KDE, right?
I use KDE, yes. So it attaches to SDDM. If I log in at a TTY, my Yubikey has to be present. It is attached to everything that ever asks for my authentication.
Okay.
That, yes, that does make it annoying. Maybe. But I also know
Yeah.
there's no way you're getting into my system if I walk off with this. So I have a meta key binding where I hit Windows, the Win key, the Super L key, and the L, and the system locks, right? Whether I'm in KDE or I'm in the binder, it'll just lock. And this has to be present, and I have to touch it before I can get in, or anybody can get in. It doesn't matter if you're using it remotely. It doesn't matter if you're using it at the system. And since my encrypted home is bound to my password, if you don't have this, you can't decrypt my home drive, and my home drive is not accessible by the root user, so you can't get to my stuff ever.
Okay. So one doubt about Yubikey, there is no concept of recovery codes here, right? If you lose your key, you are screwed.
Okay, that's a good point. U2F, how do you have recovery codes? So in my
I'm
case,
thinking
I actually have
because
more than one Yubikey, so that if I ever
yeah.
lose one, there's one sitting in a fire safe upstairs.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking because Yubikey essentially, what Yubikey essentially does is insert string, like insert a text. So it should be possible to have a recovery code. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm definitely scratching my head like, wonder where this goes. That's a good question. I've never had to think about that because when I got my Yubikey before, I mean, mind you, when I say I got my Yubikey, so you know, I've got one of the nice pretty ones now that we have from work. However, when I bought mine a couple years ago, Yubikey was running a Black Friday sale, so I bought two of them for $20, and I got a dirt cheap pair. In which, for those of you who don't have one, that haven't bought a second or whatever, yes, they're covered as a company expense. Okay. So I bought two, I set them both up, and then I stuck one in a fire safe or a safety deposit box or whatever. So there's always a way for me to get back in as a backup. I can just go grab the other one and plug it in. This also means that I have 2 of them set up on my Google, I have 2 of them set up on my GitLab, etc., etc., etc. But after all that hassle, I never have to worry about what's going to happen. And my safe is bolted to the studs, so that's going to be a pain to get out. You're not going to get out of that one. And if you try to cut into that particular safe, you'll set most of it on fire on the inside. So that's safe enough, because if you try to steal it, you either have to move 300 pounds, or cutting it open, you're going to incinerate everything. So I'll be pissed. But you're not getting my secrets.
Cool.
So we will have to look into backup codes. In the meantime, my suggestion is honestly get a second one and have it configured the same way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But so you have it set up for your own username, or also for the root? Or
Only my username. My machine does not allow root to log in.
yeah, okay.
So I have
But you can sudo being root, but you cannot.
Correct. I can sudo su, but I cannot actually run su. You can't log in as root ever. Now, there should be an out-of-the-box configuration like that for Ubuntu, if I remember correctly. With the exception of it allows you to log in. If you intentionally configure it, you can configure it to log in as root over SSH with keys only. I'd never suggest allowing that, ever, by the way. But yeah, so only my user account has the ability to actually log into the machine. And to do anything with my user account, you have to use PAM, which is attached to U2F, which means Yubikey has to be present.
And are you using your Yubikey also for SSH access to other machines?
I have not begun doing that yet. I haven't had time to look into it. Instead, I use passworded SSH keys that are either 4096 or ECDSH. Now, I know there's a way to actually store those keys on here, but I haven't done the work to do SSH secured through client certificates and then populating the certificates through the SSH via the Yubikey. So I don't have that to document for anybody. I'm sure some of our SREs are already doing this though.
Yeah, there's a doc in the runbook repo describing how to store SSH keys and GPG keys, I think, both of them in Yubikey.
Bingo. So at some point, we need to collect what happened in the notes of this call and then write said runbook. But I wanted to get at least the knowledge out there.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't have any more doubts.
No, me neither.
Okay.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jason.
I will take these notes and I will throw them up on Filtered as a private. We are about time boxed. So thanks for listening to me ramble, and I'm glad everybody got some questions answered.
Yeah, pretty cool. Thanks for the demo. Bye.
Yeah.